Hi, my name is Reed Silverne. The name of this show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker, retired, and proud of it. Today for me, it's the 18th of April. For you, it's the 23rd of April, the week after that, or sometime deep in May. As I often say, you are looking into the past to the 18th of April and me talking. And usually what I say is going to be so obsolete and so irrelevant to everything going on in your era deep into the future. 5 days, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's hard to say that you're going to say, why is he talking about these things? Last month, I talked about the Ukraine situation. And in the Ukraine situation, Putin had just basically forced an annexation of the Crimea, which is this peninsula right here, and then basically took it over with soldiers that didn't have insignias on their outfits, but the outfits looked just like Russian intelligence directorate outfits. They had Russian machine guns. They came in with APCs and so on and so forth, but they weren't known what they were. They took over all the administrative and police buildings in the Ukraine. They isolated the Ukrainian military in some bases, and they actually rolled tanks out of Sevastopol, which is the headquarters of the Russian Navy in the Black Sea, and that can get into the Mediterranean over there. And then they had a self-declared republic, independent republic, and then they had a referendum. And despite the fact that only 58% of the people on this peninsula were ethnic Russians, the vote in the referendum was 97+%, higher than any vote that even Russians have ever had. And consequently, this is the Ukraine right here, and consequently they had themselves annexed to Russia, and Russia took it over. So I said, this is either an irrelevant thing that you won't even bother about next show, or when you actually saw the show last week, the week before that, or it's going to be a big deal. Well, it has been a big deal because this area right here, which is the Donetsk area, has had Russian military-like people with machine guns take over all the administrative buildings in 10 different cities in the Donetsk area. The biggest, of course, is Donetsk itself, which is about, I'd say, 700,000, 800,000 people. But there's a bunch of other littler cities in the 300,000 all the way down to 100,000 range. Basically, one city, Slavyansk, they actually surrounded the city, completely invested it, and set up checkpoints all around it. So they were daring the Ukraine to go in there. The Ukraine fought back a little bit in the area. There was an attempt to take over an airport that had Ukrainian troops in it, and the Ukrainian troops resisted, and one soldier got killed. In another place, which is on the coast of the Black Sea, called Mariupol, they tried to take over a little base, and there the Ukrainians fought back, and they were dispersed. However, Putin has had a show on TV, I think yesterday, and basically he referred to what he called Novaya Russia. And Novaya Russia is New Russia, and it's the areas that were taken over mostly from the Polish Empire or the Turkish Empire, and it's composed of this whole area over here. And he calls it New Russia, or Novaya Russia. And basically over here is Moldavia, which is actually populated mostly by Moldavians, and Moldavians are really Romanians. Here's Romania right here. Romania is in NATO. If they invade NATO, Romania, we are required to come in and resist and possibly even risk a nuclear war. I believe Bulgaria is in NATO. I'm not absolutely sure. Poland is definitely in NATO, and so are the 3 Baltic countries, which were also part of the Soviet Union. However, the Ukraine is not in NATO, and the only guarantee that we have to protect them was a treaty, which was a great treaty, which required in the 1990s, the Ukrainians to give up a gigantic nuclear weapon force, which if they had it today, the Russians would be a little afraid to annex Crimea or do anything. Especially come in with tanks. However, they gave those up in return for a guarantee by Russia and the United States. And the nuclear weapons that had been in the Ukraine were transferred to Russia itself. Many of them, especially the obsolete ones, were destroyed. It's called the Nunn-Lugar Act. In the United States that financed this. We financed that whole thing. And another country, 2 countries, Belarus and Kazakhstan, which is over there, all gave up their nuclear weapons. And of course, by giving up their nuclear weapons, any instability in these countries, and there has been plenty, especially in the last couple months, would not result in nuclear war. So, however, by giving up their nuclear weapons, they open themselves up toward this aggression. And let's face it, no matter what anybody says, I know Khrushchev gave the Crimea to Russia in 1954, and before that it wasn't. This area over here has been basically part of the Ukrainian SSR, Soviet Socialist Republic, from the beginning. And what he calls Novaya Russia is the next step in the master plan. Now, I'm talking to you from the 18th of April, and I have to say that just yesterday they announced they had a big meeting between Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, Kerry, our Secretary of State, and the foreign minister of the UK, and some other, Ashton, the head of the foreign affairs for the European Union. They all got together and there was an agreement. And the agreement was that in Donetsk, which is this area right here, and these 10 cities, that the Russians had agreed that the pro-Russian militants, whatever they're called, who basically the Ukrainians and we, with our extensive NSA surveillance, have determined are mostly members of the Russian intelligence directorate, and that they need to disarm, get out of these public buildings, and in return, the Ukraine, which was at the meeting, would offer a nationwide referendum to go to federated state, and probably at least grant more autonomy. Now, let me show you here that over here, there's a majority of Russians, just as there was in Crimea. That doesn't mean that there's no Ukrainian speakers over there. It's just a majority. But the rest of Novaya Russia, which is this whole area right in here, is majority Ukrainian. Ukrainian ethnic, Ukrainian speaking, speaking Ukrainian, not Russian at home, although most Ukrainians speak Russian, at least the older people do, back from the era when they were part of the Soviet Union, and everybody had to learn Russian as the first language of everything and the second language in all of the republics. So the area where they speak almost exclusively Ukrainian is over here. and they voted against Yanukovych when he ran for president. This Novaya Rossiya area is over here, and the Russians haven't made a move for it yet. And over here at the edge of Moldavia is a little area. Moldavia has a big river, the Dnieper that goes through it, and Transnistria, the Transnistrian Republic, which is supported mostly by smuggling, has a majority of Russian speakers, not Ukrainians, but Russian speakers over here, just in this little edge of Moldavia. The rest of Moldavia is almost exclusively Romanian speaking, and they're basically the same people that live over here in Romania itself. So it's a very complicated situation. The Russians would like to annex everything over here, which they call southeast Ukraine. But what they would really prefer is to have the Ukraine to themselves. The last president of the Ukraine, who stole millions and billions of dollars, built himself a giant palace right outside of the main city in Kiev, and was tossed out after his partisans started shooting demonstrators in the city of Kiev, or Kyiv, I think is the correct way to pronounce it. Basically, Yanukovych condemned the takeover of the Crimea by the Russian state, even though he's in Russia right now under their protection. But this area voted mostly for Yanukovych, and this area voted almost exclusively for Tymoshenko, the Ukrainian, pro-Ukrainian, pro-European candidate who was defeated, barely, after the Russians cut off Ukraine of all natural gas during the wintertime and forced them to freeze. So even with that, they could only win by 1 million votes. And this guy basically took over Ukraine, threw his opponent in jail, threw the pro-Europeans in jail, and stole. I mean, if he had at least had the integrity to just steal a little bit, he might still be in power today. But he decided to steal everything that he could get his hands on. And on top of that, to rub it in by building this gigantic palace. So it really became, almost a Saddam moment when they invaded his palace and found millions and millions of dollars of luxuries in it, while the Ukrainian people were, if not starving, at least having a very, very low standard of living. So the Ukrainians are in for a penny, in for a pound. They're going to have their election in May, which is next month. And Putin would love to have them back into what he called a Slavic customs union, which was Kazakhstan, Russia, the Ukraine, and Belarus. And it was very embarrassing. Basically, right now, even after taking over the Crimea, even after intervening in Donetsk, Putin is right now a net loser because he had the Ukraine, the whole Ukraine. Russia's influence basically bordered on Romania and Poland, was right against the edge of NATO, and now it's been pushed back. And he, in order to get his self-respect back, has got to either take something, and he has, the Crimea, or Novaya Rossiya, or force a pro-Russian presidency and a totalitarian pro-Russian state that will never be challenged again, which he thought he had and thought he got in 2006, 2007. So that's the story right now, and we'll see whether this agreement is enforced. The People's Republic of Donetsk is still saying that they're going to have a referendum and separate from the Ukraine. It's a question mark whether Putin wants to go the next step, even though he's been very defiant, and he was very defiant in his TV show. So you people in the future, and I have to make a shout out to my friend who actually tapes my show, and you know who you are, looking into April 18th. I don't know what you know. I don't know what you've heard on the news. But I have a feeling that this story isn't over and that this agreement might not be the last word. But Putin has been defiant. And there are stories that the reason he's so defiant and the reason he's making this thing stay in the news in Russia. Of course, he now controls all the media in Russia, including blogs. They just nationalized internet bloggers in Russia proper right now. So he has all the media under his control, basically as an ideological media state, which has most of the assets are run by a few oligarchs who owe Putin for everything. And the question is he going to stop, or is he going to keep going until he's taken over the whole Ukraine? And if he does take over the whole Ukraine and Moldavia, is he going to put a puppet in there? Is he going to annex it outright? Or is he going to stop? Or is he going to attack countries that are now in NATO, that we're required to defend? Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Poland, Romania, Turkey on the other side, that we're required to defend even with nuclear weapons if they are attacked. So it's hard to say how crazy Putin's been. And so far he's been crazy like a fox, because he knows that if the Europe and the United States decide to cut off the Russian banks, that the ruble will collapse, and basically everything in Russia, all trade in Russia, just like it is in Iran right now, will have to be cash and carry. And the Europeans are already ready to have their natural gas cut off by Russia. They have a 6-month supply. They have already begun. They've set up the valves on all of their pipelines so that they can pump natural gas toward Russia and even to the Ukraine itself. It's already started in order to protect the Ukraine and so on and so forth. And they have 6 months to basically increase imports from other countries. Where would they import? Qatar has so much natural gas, it's not funny. I don't know exactly how much the capacity that Europe has for liquefied natural gas, but I can tell you it's considerable. There's big, giant liquefied natural gas facilities in Spain that can take ship after ship after ship, and there are suppliers that are happy to replace the Russians. So it's not over yet, but Putin is holding a lot of the cards, but he is not holding all of them. And it all depends on how aggressive he is and how aggressive he remains, whether Europe is just going to put up with it or whether Europe is going to get afraid of one raid after another, one increase in military attacks after another, whether they're finally going to say enough is enough and you're on your own. Because right now, Russia produces a lot of energy, a lot of natural resources. Most of their metals go to China, don't go to anywhere else. And Europe and America doesn't need them at all. Europe can get along without them, but it would cause some economic disruption. So what's going to happen? Now, I mentioned that Russia is an oligarchy, and I have an important thing to talk about, and that is a study from Princeton appeared on a Princeton website. It's called, in the academic journal Perspective on Politics, Martin Gillens and Benjamin Page, and they basically compared in the United States, and I'm going to go to the United States in the background here. Here's Canada, and here's the beginning of the U.S. They've compared the opinions of the median voter. Basically, the median voter is if you're pro-gun, 50% are more pro-gun than you, 50% are less pro-gun than you, 50% are more Obamacare than you, 50% or less, 50% of this, 50% of that, and compare that to what actually occurs. And what they found is that, surprise, surprise, America is an oligarchy. Basically, the wealthy decide what the policy is. They have, especially the Koch brothers and their network, have a lot of pundits and Fox News is Murdoch and close to it, and Ailes supporting their positions. But basically, the bottom line is that if the oligarchy wants to unbalance the budget by lowering taxes for themselves, or balance the budget by keeping their taxes extra low and increasing taxes on the middle class, they will do it. And so basically, our policy is controlled by oligarchs. Now, a lot of people think, all the oligarchs are the same, but that is not really true. There's really three sets of oligarchs. The first set are Alexander Pope, Charles Schwab, DeVos, and the largest, of course, are the Koch brothers, who have a $100 billion company at their beck and call. And they have, and I've talked about it before, this network of nonprofits and fake nonprofits and political action committees and everything else. And basically what they want to do is privatize Social Security, voucherize Medicare and eventually get rid of it, get rid of food stamps, and they're against, really want to defund public schools and so on and so forth, and take all the publicly owned utilities like DWP in California and privatize it, give it to private industry for a song very close to what happened in the falling days of the Soviet Union, the beginning of modern Russia, and have the oligarchs basically control everything, and the rest of the people to be in a state of nature where they have no benefits, they have nothing to look forward to, they negotiate man on man with the most powerful people in the world, and if they don't get a full minimum wage, then that's their problem, basically. And if they die under a bridge, they get sick and can't afford and aren't given health insurance, then they die under a bridge. Good. But that is not all of the oligarchs. There are very, very wealthy people that realize that if that vision actually occurs, that all the oligarchs are going to end up with their heads on pikes, just like the French Revolution. Guillotines and their heads being carried on pikes. Because the other 99.9999% are eventually not going to put up with it. And just the fact that all the media says this is right is eventually not going to convince everybody. Just like the Tsarist in 1910 and the French aristocrats in 1780. So they believe that throw everybody a bone, you can lower my taxes. That's the Rove group. And then there's a third way Democrats group that says, let's keep Social Security and let's at least have a bottom, a safety net for the average people, so that when they fall through it, then they won't be desperate. especially since they're armed. My name's Reed Silverne. I do want to say that Access Tucson is having its budget drastically cut. The city council were going to sell the building, but they haven't. They've decided not to, but I'm not sure that I'm going to be on.